All right, so there's a new patch. The Spellbreak just got a new release, 3.1, the mid-season patch for Chapter 2. I know that's confusing. 3.1, it's Chapter 2. You know, just don't think about it too hard. But there have been a lot of changes in the game. Being a Pyromancer main, I wanted to talk about Pyromancer. We need to talk about Pyromancer because Proletariat, they took the hammer to Pyromancer this patch. I mean, oh man, if you can tell, I'm not super happy about the changes. We'll take a look at it here. We'll run through it. I'll tell you my thoughts on everything and where we can kind of go from here. And actually, as I've been thinking about it, I think there are some good solutions. But as it is, yeah, Pyromancer is probably going to be pretty weak until the next patch we get. Here we go. There's a new screen here, by the way, too. Your class select screen has been revamped. So this is, I mean, a lot better UI, to be honest. That's kind of nice. I like that. This is a good change, by the way. You know, if I'm going to be critical, I got to be nice too, right? So that's a good change. Now let's just run down all the changes that happens. I'll tell you about the changes, and then I'll tell you about how I think about them, what I think about them, and then where we can go from there. So cool. We'll start with the abilities. Now, obviously you have your sorcery and your spell right here. So Flame Wall actually got two different changes. First of all, a lot of the different sorceries in the game, their cast speed was increased. So it's a longer cast speed. The cast speed went from 0.6 seconds to 0.8 seconds. So 0.2 seconds longer it takes to cast a Flame Wall now. Honestly, having tried it out a little bit, I don't think that's a huge nerf. It makes it a little bit more costly to actually pull your Flame Wall out. You have to be slightly smarter about when you do it, but ultimately, I don't think that's a huge change. What is a huge change, and what I'm most disappointed about with Pyromancer this patch, is that Flame Wall's duration has been reduced from 15 seconds down to 6 seconds, cutting it more than half of what it used to be. There's kind of a lot to talk about here as to why that's exactly why I really don't like that change. Basically, Flame Wall was a big part of the Pyromancer class because if you look at the skills for Pyromancer, there's really not a lot going on. Combust is an okay ability. I think Ignite is actually a really nice ability. Your explosion radius, it's good for a Pyromancer, right? It's beneficial. It helps you out in the game, but I think it causes a lot of Pyromancers to crutch and not really have to aim that much. It seems to be something that the developers like, not something that I necessarily like, although I benefit from it as a Pyromancer for sure. The extra damage that you get from the explosion radius too, it's been trailed off a lot. You used to do a lot more damage on average when you didn't get a direct hit on somebody. Now you do. I mean, it's either you get a direct hit or you do 8 damage most of the time. Combust is, you know, Ignite is pretty useful, but you know, explosion radius. So Combust is like, okay. Firefly is a decent ability, and when it's not buggy, it seems like it's not nearly as buggy as it used to be. When it's not buggy, it's a pretty good ability, and we like Firefly. Paralysis is literally nothing. It's like, why is it here? And then Conflagration is also like, why? So these last two abilities don't really do anything for you, right? So Flame Wall and the attached Firefly skill with it is a big part of the Pyromancer's kit. And what was really nice before is that a Pyromancer could really keep using Firefly again and again and get a lot of utility out of that. They could kind of keep going, and they could Firefly out from their Flame Wall, maybe dash back into it, Firefly again. They could get a lot of use out of it and reposition really fast. It was a great way. I have a video on my channel from way back, I think like right when Spellbreak launched, in September, about how it's like the anti-stone Pyromancer build. And it's about how I play against stone players basically, and it's just to always keep fireflying through your Flame Wall, dash back to it, you know, do some damage, dash back, do some damage, dash back, and you can really stay in the air basically forever doing that. It was a really nice playstyle that has just been shut out. And there are other abilities too that don't last. You know, most of the other sorceries don't last until you can pick the sorcery back up again, right? We think of Toxicologists for this is a great example. Your Tox Cloud, when you get Vanishing Mists at level 2, your Tox Cloud only lasts for 5 seconds, so you can only Vanishing Mist so many times of that. You can recloud, right? And if you're, you know, the better you get at Toxicologist, the more reclouding you should be able to do in different situations. But still, you can only do it for 5 seconds, then it takes 8 seconds longer to get your cooldown back on your Tox Cloud, on your sorcery. That seems pretty balanced to me, because you get a huge benefit from using Vanishing Mist once you hit level 3. You get Outbreak. Go back to Pyromancer. No benefit here. Firefly was a good skill because you could keep reusing it and you could always use it. It was always available to you. Now Flame Wall only lasts for 6 seconds. You're just taking a lot of the utility away from Pyromancers. Now, I think this isn't all a bad change because a lot of people used fire offhand and a lot of Pyromancers would just use Flame Wall as sort of AoE. And a big trend that we've seen from this patch is that Proletariat is cutting back on AoE damage, which is really good. I think it's a smart change, and it makes for a more skilled game, a game that where people can't just crutch on, throwing Tox Cloud down, putting Flame Wall down, putting Tornado down, letting that stew all together, and hey, about a victory royale, because, you're just like mindlessly slapping these things down on the floor. So for the AoE perspective, I actually really like that. With fire as an offhand, the fire gauntlet does need to be checked back into reality a little bit because it is just like the best all-around gauntlet. The best gauntlet that you can use in so many situations and so many different classes can make use of it, right? Like fire is arguably the best offhand for Stone Shaper. It's arguably the best offhand for Conduit. It's one of the 2 best offhands for Toxicologist. It's probably the 2nd best offhand for Frostborn, maybe the 3rd behind Toxic and Stone, but it's, in contention for Frostborn, and it's probably the best offhand for Tempest as well. So it's literally usable. It's one of the best, if not the best, offhand gauntlet for each of the other classes, which tells you that it probably needs to be reined in. In that way, I understand this change. I think for Pyromancers, though, this takes a class that is already not really doing much and strips away the main thing that was nice about the class. I'm obviously not very happy about that at all, and that's Flame Wall. Fireball itself got another nerf, which I actually really like this one. I think this is good. It seems like maybe the travel speed of Fireball was reduced but a good amount. Just going into the practice mode and testing around with this, it seems like they might have nerfed the travel speed of Fireball and not said anything. I'm not totally sure, but the collision size of Fireball was reduced by 30%, which is a huge reduction and was needed. Are pretty bad. But we'll see how we can adjust them in a little bit. I did mention all the class skills before, but I just kind of want to run through them again and talk about why I don't think Pyromancer is a very good class and where we can go from here. Looking at the first skill in the class, Combust, like I said before, Ignite is a pretty decent skill. It does some extra damage, but it really helps you track your opponents, which is what I really like about it. You can really read where your opponent is, and I think that's a big part of the Pyromancer playstyle. Now, some people don't like this, but Pyromancer is the W key class. If you think about a fire, a raging inferno, thematically, it kind of makes sense for fire to just be all out attack, running forward, doing damage, not caring about, yourself or what's going to happen to you. You're just in go mode. That is true in the 2nd level skill. Firefly, you're literally flying directly at people. The gauntlet itself is, this big rocket that you're sending out. And Ignite just lets you do that a little bit more. You're tracking people, you're pushing them, you're putting pressure on them. Ignite is actually a really good tool. Like I said, the explosion radius is not necessarily a bad thing, but it gives some Pyromancers maybe a tendency to not necessarily have to aim and do damage in situations where it's not necessarily satisfying to actually do damage. If you're hitting someone, if you're just like aiming at the ground and hitting them for 8 and 8 and 8, that's not really satisfying for you to miss, but then still do some damage. And it's not satisfying for the other person to take some damage when maybe they use their abilities to get away from you and you still hit them because you missed. So that's not super satisfying, but thematically, it does make a little bit of sense, right? It's just a bigger explosion. Is this fireball explosion is just even bigger. So I'm not super upset about that, but there you go. 2nd level ability, Firefly is a good ability. You're immune to your flame walls, which is good. You fly for 2 seconds. Another thing that they adjusted this patch is that flights, whether you're using the rune or from Firefly, the flight friction in the air has been reduced by 50%, which basically makes it easier for you to turn. It's easier to turn and you don't slow down as much when you're turning in midair. Having tested this out, it's decent. It's not like you can really like whip around in the air like you're using the dash rune or anything like that, not near anything like that, but it's a good change and it's a good direction, I think, for flight to go in. Just to have a little bit more in-air control with flight, I think is not a bad thing. Like I said before though, flame wall being reduced to 6 seconds makes Firefly a much worse talent, and it's basically the only talent that I really like totally. You had Ignite, you had Firefly, and that was basically Pyromancer. And now Firefly is a lot worse. So Pyromancer's really not that much of a class. And you can see in these last 2 abilities, Pyrolysis, you get 100% damage buff for the first 2 seconds of your flame wall. I mean, it's not bad to do 12 damage a tick instead of 6, but it's not super useful. I don't know. It's such a small ability. When you look at other third level abilities for other classes, most of the other classes, Stone Shaper being the exception, most of the other classes have really significant abilities at their third level. Power Surge on Conduit. Outbreak, of course, is like the most powerful, one of the most powerful abilities in the game. Tundra is class defining for Frostborn, and Squall is super class defining for Tempest. Pyromancer gets a little bit extra damage. That's like, I mean, it's not bad, but it's not significant. For 2 seconds, it's not even their entire flame wall. It's 2 seconds of their flame wall. It's really just kind of a nothing talent. And then Conflagration used to be a lot worse in a previous iteration where there were 4 exploding cinders that did 10 damage each, which, you know, you would much more often be doing damage to yourself. Now you're immune to the cinders that come off. There are 6 of them. They no longer do direct damage, but they do apply ignite. But you very rarely actually hit someone directly with them. Even with the buffed cinders, 6 cinders, Conflagration really doesn't give you that much. And yeah, I mean, if you just look at other classes, 4th level abilities, Avalanche is really good for Stone Shaper. You get another sorcery. That's awesome. Secondary Strike takes one of the better area denial sorceries in the game and makes it an insanely better area denial sorcery with the added strikes. Spreading Sickness gives you way more utility to your Tox Clouds. Ice Prism is a significant damage increase for Frostborn, and then Tempest reduces your cooldowns a crazy amount, and you can basically just constantly be using your sorceries. These are all really like nice class defining features, and then Pyromancer gets you get little fireworks on your thing that don't really ever hit anybody and are kind of just there for show, and maybe they explode a Tox Cloud sometimes. You know, there's not a lot going on with Pyromancer, so and this update nerfed it even harder. Like I said before, I'm not upset about the nerfs from an offhand fire perspective, but from an on-hand perspective, yeah, I'm not too psyched about it. So let's talk about where we can go from here. For a 3rd level talent, there's sort of 2 abilities from 2 different classes that you could sort of mix together a little bit to do something similar for Pyromancers that would actually give it a really nice 3rd level ability. Tundra, increasing the sorcery duration, and Squall either increases your spell damage or reduces incoming damage. So I think taking one of these abilities from Squall, not both, but one of these, maybe not to the percentages that they're at, but you know, we can debate about the numbers, but in theory, you would take one of these abilities and then your increased duration on your sorcery, and you put it into this 3rd level ability. So now you would have a Pyromancer that their flame wall lasts for basically the entire time that it's until it gets a recharge like it was before, right? Flame wall used to last for 15 seconds. If you had at least a rare gauntlet, that means you could recast your flame wall as soon as it went out. Now, if you were double the amount of time, so from 6 seconds to 12 seconds, if you had a 12-second flame wall sorcery, that wouldn't totally get you all the way. You know, if you had a legendary gauntlet, that would be 13 seconds. But, you know, you would be much closer, right? You would be much closer to being able to always have your flame wall up and being able to effectively use Firefly throughout a match once you got your 3rd level. And then when you go and take one of these Squall abilities, you know, there's kind of a bug in the game. It seems like a bug, although I think it is actually a good chance to utilize this in a specific direction. So what happens when you Firefly, you have these embers that trail off of your hands. And sometimes when you cancel the Firefly, those embers kind of stay on your hands and they remain for the 2 seconds that Firefly goes. If you added in something like incoming damage reduction or a damage buff for you, either one of those abilities, for the purpose of Firefly, I would probably do a damage reduction. You're a bit of a target while you're flying. You know, it's really obvious, it's really loud, and it's harder to maneuver. So I would probably do a pretty big damage reduction while you have those tendrils. That way you'd be able to Firefly a lot, and while you're Fireflying, you would not be taking as much damage, which kind of adds to the whole W key nature of Pyromancer, right? Like you're heading forwards, you're going all out, you're not caring as much about what's actually happening to you because, you know, you're safeguarded, you're Fireflying, you're not taking as much damage. I think that would actually be a really nice thematic and useful 3rd level talent for Pyromancer, and something that I hope they consider going forward. Then for your 4th level talent, you could either do, I mean, I would just get rid of Conflagration. Personally, I know that Proletariat, they seem to really like they like having the fireworks because it's like, it is thematic, but it's just so useless. So I would get rid of conflagration. I don't know that I totally see that happening, but I would personally get rid of conflagration. I might add pyrolysis into conflagration. That would make it, you know, a little bit more of a 4th level talent. I think one thing you could also do, and we see this in other classes a little bit, you would have to balance this really well so that it didn't stack with other things and unbalance the game. But having a little bit of a healing feature at your 4th level Pyromancer talent, I'm thinking, you know, you use your Firefly, and while you're in Firefly, you know, you might heal 5 health, not shield, 5 health per second. Something like that. Maybe you're immune to your flame puddles. You walk through a flame puddle and you heal 2 health. You know, they used to have an ability in the game. I think it was called like Phoenix or something. Way back before I started playing in Spellbreak, that was, you know, you could walk through your flames and you would heal. Adding that into Pyromancer again gives it that theme of being kind of this, you know, this W key berserker, this person who's always willing to run forward. Of course, you would have to balance that against things like Vampiric, against things like Fellowship, you know, using it with Vigor and with pots in the game to make sure that people aren't out healing the storm forever, to make sure that, you know, you don't want a situation where you can't kill a Pyromancer because they're just healing too much all the time. But giving Pyromancer a little bit of health over time just allows them to kind of really run in and be that frontline fighter that is thematic to the Pyromancer in its current state and would just kind of embody it more. I think you could go a bunch of different ways with your 4th level talent, but that's sort of the way I would like to go, is to get a little bit of healing, either a little bit of healing or a little bit of a speed boost to make Pyromancers faster. So, you know, if they go through their flame wall, then, you know, maybe they get an increased move speed for a certain amount of time, or maybe they just get a move. Like your 4th level talent is you have +3 to move, which would be kind of crazy, but would be really interesting for a class that is all about the W key. I might also think about putting that move speed in somewhere else as well, but that's, you know, I'm not trying to do a complete class overhaul, just to address the main problem, which I think is the lack of any significant skills past Firefly in this class. And I think with that new 3rd level talent, we actually have something that could be really cool and really special. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Were those good ideas? Were they bad ideas? Let me know in the comments below. Yeah, I'd like to have a discussion about this. Definitely something needs to happen about Pyromancer. And to be honest, this update, I'm crossing my fingers. I'm hoping that it's just setting us up for an actual class overhaul, because otherwise, man, Pyromancer's in a rough spot. So let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know what you think about the Pyromancer class, the changes in 3.1, and also my changes for the class. Let me know what you think about them. I'd be interested to hear your feedback. All right, guys, until next time.